Hey guys, what's going on? It's Tass here and welcome back to my third video on this channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're not going to be talking about med school advice per se, but I'm going to be giving you guys a visual representation of my 4 years in college. And the best way that I can do that is by going through my GPA. So the purpose of this video isn't necessarily to give you guys a glimpse into what I applied with, but rather to basically give you guys an idea of what it's like to go through 4 years of college. And on top of that, I wanted to run a lot of things by you guys, like a lot of my obstacles, what I did to improve, things that I wish I could have done better, and maybe you guys will learn from my mistakes and also my triumphs. Another reason for this video is that a lot of undergraduates who have come to me and my friends who have graduated already express a lot of concerns about having lower GPAs and having doubts about whether to pursue medicine or not. So I guess this video is also for those people who feel that way, that your GPA is not competitive enough, and especially if you have 1 or 2 more years left of undergrad, I think that this video will serve as a good representation and as proof that your GPA can get better. So let's get started. It's going to be a very long video, so stay with me here, but I promise you there's a good point to it. So we start off in fall of 2015. I just got out of high school. I didn't really know how to study at the time, and to be honest, at that point in time, I didn't know that I didn't know how to study. I think that a lot of my high school classes had extra credit and things that really buffered my GPA in high school to what it was. And unfortunately for me, I found out the hard way that college isn't like that. And so when I took chemistry for the first time, I didn't really know how to do well. I didn't understand office hours. I was very intimidated by the professor and I was afraid to reach out. On top of that, this is one of the first classes I had where it was suggested homework, which I'm sure a lot of you know by now. Suggested homework actually means you should do it, especially do it before the midterm and use it as practice even for the final. I didn't do the suggested homework, so I ended up not really knowing how to answer questions on the midterm and on the finals, and so it just really, I screwed myself basically, so don't do that. I also took econ as a religion. It was an honors course because I was, and up until my 4th year, was a part of the university honors program. So I took this class and it helped buffer my GPA by quite a bit. I think this was the class that I had a very good professor in who taught me it was okay to reach out to the professor for help. I didn't end up doing very well on the first midterm in that class, and after talking to the professor, I really understood what I was supposed to do. And this was proof that, it's okay to talk to your professors as well. I also took Math 8B, and fortunately for me, I actually placed higher on the math placement exam. I don't know how that happened because I'm not very good at math. And so for me to be able to do that and finish math in just a couple of classes, I was very thankful for it. I think I got a B+ and I was saved by this B+ because of my professor too, because I ended up, actually taking advantage of the practice that he gave us in class and also the practice midterms that he would give us before our tests, because that also ended up being very similar to the actual test itself. So I was able to get a good grade just, luckily because I actually took the opportunity to study and actually practice the questions that I was given. So I wish I had done that and applied that to General Chemistry 1A, but I didn't. I ended the quarter with a 3.44, and that was the way that I started my college career. And, a 3.44, not bad. Definitely not bad. I think that it's competitive for a lot of DO schools too, but for me, I didn't know that at the time, and so I didn't really think this was a great GPA. I was fortunate in my mind that I didn't get anything below a 3.0, because honestly, I was afraid that that would happen. So moving on to winter of 2016, I actually took this was the first quarter that I took biology, and this quarter definitely reaffirmed my desire to be a biology major. And from there, I actually learned how to study better. I learned to use my creative side. It's okay to study creatively as long as you do it efficiently. So I learned to do that with biology. It was also the first time I realized that I can't study the same for every class. So the way that I studied for biology should differ from the way that I studied for chemistry, for example. Dynamic genome was also a really good move for me. If you're going to UCR as a STEM major soon, I do recommend doing dynamic genome. I think you have to be in an LC to do it, but the reason that I recommend it is because the grading was so much more fair for this class than it was for Bio 5A lab. And I think I ended up getting an A and like a better GPA because of that. I also really like Chem 1B. That was my favorite chem. I guess that was my favorite part of the chem series because Gen Chem and Gen Chem lab actually lined up. Like all the topics that were discussed, I would see in lab and I would actually, work with my hands and actually see a product of what I learned. And so I was applying it to real life and I really appreciated that. So first year calculus, this was definitely one of my lowest grades in my entire college career, that B-. I didn't like calculus. I didn't like math to begin with, but on top of that, I felt that my professor wasn't somebody that I could reach out to as well. I actually worked very hard in this class. We hired a private tutor for me. I also went to office hours. I went to TA office hours. And unfortunately for me, I just didn't really understand the more complicated problems. And I, emailed the professor to talk to him after the final, and he never responded to me. So that definitely hurt my GPA, but fortunately it also, my GPA went up too. So spring 2016 was life-changing. I think that, that was when I was like, okay, there's actually hope for me. I learned a couple of things during this quarter. I learned that, breath courses really help to supplement and buffer your GPA, while extra credit in high school might have done that for my GPA back then. Definitely breath courses helped me out in my overall GPA. I did have to keep in mind though that my math and science GPA was still important, and that was something that I needed to increase over time, but I was just very happy that quarter that my overall GPA was doing better. Chem 1C was also where I learned that it was very important to study on my own. Because I was in a learning community with 20 to 30 other people, I felt that I was obligated to participate in group culture, which I was not necessarily obligated to do in the first place. While it was great to have an LC and it was great to make friends and establish lifelong friendships, it was not necessarily important to study with these people. Everybody studies on their own, everybody studies at different paces, at different levels, and it just did not work, unfortunately, for our group dynamic. So this was where I learned to kind of study on my own or in smaller spaces with less amounts of people. And I think that really made the difference overall. So now I guess we're going to talk about summer 2016, which was the worst summer of my life. So here's what happened. I decided to take OChem over the summer. If you didn't know this, UCR offers OChem in the summer for 3 weeks at a time. So I literally was taking OChem, each part of the series, within 3 weeks, including labs, I think 3 or 4 times a week, and taking a midterm or a final every week. So that was the decision that I made to inflict pain onto myself by doing this. I think the reason that I did it was because I wanted to be able to skip triple threat. If you don't know what triple threat is, it's basically the first quarter of your second year. You're wrapping up on the last part of the biology series, and you're also starting physics, so that's 2, and then you're also starting OChem, so that's 3. So the reason most people want to avoid triple threat is because that's an overload on the sciences, which ideally you wouldn't want to do because, you got to have strategies when you're trying to work with your GPA and get a better grade. So to me, I was like, I'd rather not do 3 sciences. I'd rather do 2 at a time and just take that. But what I didn't really account for, or what I didn't really think of, was the fact that OChem in the summer is way harder than doing triple threat. So I ended up actually just making it worse on myself. I really believe that I could have done better in OChem had I taken it the following quarter. So really think about like the way that you're planning your summers and like how you want to take your classes, because honestly, I really think I could have done a lot better in OChem had I not taken it so quickly. On top of that, I ended up not being able to breeze through this topic when I was studying for the MCAT, because guess what? 3 weeks of OChem at a time, I learned nothing. I really don't remember most of OChem because of it. So I think that this summer was something that, I do wish I had erased from my college career. I wish I had done the normal student path, but I didn't. I was beginning physics, and then I decided to hold off on biology until the following quarter. So I ended up doing that. I think that with this quarter, it was relatively okay. The B in general physics lab was because I got wrecked by the curve. Everybody missed like a point on their quiz, and then I missed like 4. So that really made a difference. The curve really wrecked me there. But other than that, My GPA was all right. I was finally breaking that 3.5. I learned how to dance. I never dance. So I actually learned how to dance there, and yeah, everything was fine there. No complaints. With winter 2017, like I said, I was finishing up the last part of the bio series, and then I continued my physics series. And then what I regret the most here, though, is, you know how I said that breath courses were really good for improving overall GPA? I took that a little too far, and I decided to do double the amount of breath courses. So I took 2, making that 4 classes that I was taking at the same time. I don't recommend that. I think that I would have done a lot better had I not done that. The last thing that I learned from this quarter, which was really important to me, was that I learned that I passive studied. So up until that point, I didn't occur to me that when I was reading textbooks or lecture slides that I wasn't really absorbing the information. The reason I learned this was because I wasn't doing well on the first midterm of this class, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to read the textbook. Reading the textbook was a good idea. A lot of the midterm questions and stuff were inspired by topics within the textbook, but then it occurred to me on the second midterm that everything that I read, I don't know if I forgot it or if I just never had it to begin with, but yeah. I would definitely say what really helped me get through this class, and unfortunately, I was short of an A-, but what really helped me get me through and do well on the final was the fact that I read out loud. So I actually, took my textbook and I read out loud to myself. And I think that was one of the best things that I ever did, because I learned to get rid of my passive studying skills. Instead, I learned to supplement it, and I learned to, actually incorporate information into my head, because I was actually listening to myself read. And so I was getting all that information in. Unfortunately, the strategy didn't save me from getting a B+. I think it was because I just didn't do well in 2 midterms, and it was hard for the final to balance that out. But other than that, I think I learned a lot, and that helped me study later on. Also, at the end of winter 2017, I had a 3.59, so I was this close to a 3.6 that I really, really wanted. So I was really happy with that. I thought a 3.6 was the most competitive it could get for me. I thought, starting with a 3.4, I was 3.6. That's all I need to get into med school. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of you know by now, to get into med school, you need not just a good GPA, but everything else too. But to me, I was I just needed 3.6, and then I can deal with the rest. So when spring 2017 came, I was a little disappointed in myself for obvious reasons. But the reason that, I think this quarter was very tough for me was because I was having a lot of family problems. Somebody in my family actually ended up passing away too. So I ended up taking human reproduction, which was actually counted as a breath course because it was a business class technically, but it did count towards my science GPA. What really made the difference in this quarter was elementary biochemistry. Biochem was the first upper division class that I took, and fortunately for me, I had the best professor who actually became my PI, and then somebody who wrote me a letter of rec later on too. If you know this person, I'm sure you're willing to vouch the same thing. This class just made all the difference for me. I learned to like upper division classes. I learned to study better. I learned to really be passionate about the things that I was learning and apply it to real life. And I think that was really what made the difference, because if you're studying for chemistry and biology and physics, all those general classes that you were taking in your lower divs, I'm sure you guys kind of feel the same, where it's why do I have to know this? What does this have to do with real life? And while, yes, I get it, science is real life, I wasn't really seeing that. I wasn't really seeing how this would affect my future patients as a future physician. And so that was really important for me to see, and biochemistry allowed me to see that. General physics, so that last part of physics was really annoying for me. I didn't really like physics to begin with, but this was a course where I was I don't know how to practice for this class anymore. Went to supplemental instruction. I went to TA office hours and everything, but I just felt at the end of the day, I think I was putting in half the effort that I was supposed to. And so that's why I ended up with that B- right there. During summer of 2017, that was where I was catching up on my other requirements. So I ended up taking 2 classes in English because that satisfies UCR's requirements for English, I believe. But I ended up pass-failing this particular class because I thought I was going to get a B in it. And I think for me, I was in the future when I take like other English classes, I could do better than a B. So this unfortunately meant that I was going to take 2 more English classes or English related classes for med school requirements. But yeah, other than that, it was good. I managed to break into that 3.6. Again, still worrying only about my overall GPA here, but working on my STEM GPA later on too. And then we have fall 2017 here. This was where my love of upper divs really just took off. Like, I learned biochemistry and I was like, yes. Then I learned microbiome and I actually learned how to study well for it, and it really showed for the first time. I was ecstatic about it. Intro to creative writing, like I said, I knew later on I was going to get an A or something better than a B, so that's why, like, you know, pass failing, like, it was justified at that point. I also did an honors class again. That was part of my requirements to start off my capstone project or something like that. I also did intro to stats, so that satisfied my whole year of math for med school, and I actually ended up doing really well. So this was where I was at a mid 3.6, and it was beautiful because that was my first 3.9. That was like one of my highest GPAs at the time, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, and it had STEM classes in it. Like, I was so proud of myself, and I think that really motivated me to continue on as a bio major and also as a pre-med. So in winter 2018, that was where things started getting a little bit easier for me. I ended up taking classes I really liked, so I went back to biochemistry, and I actually took a biochem major class. So I took the second part of the general biochem series, and that was taught by the same professor, fortunately for me. I also joined her lab, so I was able to get research credit for it, and I ended up, you know, getting graded research units for it, so that really helped boost my overall GPA as well as my science GPA. On top of that, I do recommend doing this because it did help me free up my schedule. So I was able to work more, and I was also able to study more for the classes that I was already in. I also did my research, and I ended up taking ecology as my other upper div class. The reason for ecology was because I heard that it was a relatively less difficult course, and it was perfectly timed because this particular professor only teaches it in the winter. So I was like, I'm down, like, let's go. So I ended up getting another 3.9, which brought my GPA up a little bit more. So for the end of junior year, my 3rd year at UCR, I ended up getting a 4.0. This was the first 4.0 that I had where I actually had STEM courses in it, I believe. Really close to that 3.7. Never thought I would get here. I ended up taking genetics a little later than most people do. Most people take it their 2nd year or beginning of their 3rd year. I ended up waiting. Don't really know why. I regret doing that though. I took neuroscience, learned that I did not like neuroscience. But other than that, it was a chill quarter. Had my research units still. Very thankful for that. But yeah, I was able to, you know, balance everything that I was given, and that was really helpful because of the research units that I had. So for fall 2018, the start of 4th year, this is the year that I hit my 3.7. I was so happy because honestly, like, I didn't think that I would get to a 3.7. I think I ended with like a 3.5-ish at the end of 2nd year, and I was like, you know what? I'm already good enough. Like, I'm at almost a 3.6, like, I'm there. But it's amazing how far you can get in a year with just a really good GPA. Like, if you do well for that straight year, you can get up to, you know, like 0.1 higher than you were before. And I think that's really great, especially, you know, if you don't start out as high as you'd like to. So I ended up taking evolution, which was an online course, and then I took my, you know, my undergraduate research units, and then I also took British literature because that helped me satisfy my very last quarter for a full year of English for med school requirements. Winter 2019, I still took undergraduate research. I took pathogenic microbiology, and then I took Chicano studies to satisfy my very last requirement for breath courses. I want to say with pathogenic microbiology, that was definitely a challenge for me. I think that it really tested my ability to not passively but rather actively study and actively read. But other than that, I think it worked out pretty well. And then this is my very last quarter at UCR. I graduated in spring of 2019. And this was honestly the hardest quarter I had in a while. I was fortunate enough to have those research units and still be working in my PI's lab. But to top it off, I was taking human biochemistry, which, I hadn't taken biochemistry at that point for almost a year. And I was also taking human anatomy and physiology. And I think both of those classes require a certain level of studying and a certain level of memorization. And fortunate enough for me, those classes were very linked. It was very similar to each other, and most of the things that I learned really paralleled each other in those classes. So I was fortunate enough to have that situation. I think what really helped me out for these two classes was really bringing out my creative side again. And I ended up typing up all the learning objectives and answering them, and then also drawing out all the diagrams that I needed to draw out. And it was really helpful because I ended up, doing really well, but also I think it's a huge part of the fact that I was being very creative about how I studied for the tests. I ended with a 3.75 in my college career after starting with a 3.44. I think that ultimately at the end of the day, I was happy with this. I was ecstatic about this because I felt like an underdog for like the first 2 years of college. I felt that I questioned myself so much because I thought, I wasn't good enough. I didn't have the grades to prove it. Like I just felt like I was not good enough to be a medical student someday. And I think one of the things that I learned from this experience, from these 4 years, was that it's very humanly possible to do it. I think I have a lot of friends who, manage to open a book, close it 10 seconds later, and get an A on the test. And for me, I thought I had to be one of those people. But I think one of the things that I really took out of college was the fact that everything takes effort, and sometimes things don't go the way you want it to. But if you do give it your all, it can happen. So, there were those highs and lows in the beginning. Like my first year, I was just like, why am I not hitting that 3.5 or 3.6? And why didn't I even start with a 3.5 or a 3.6? But I think because I eventually learned to be confident in myself and learned to make better choices when registering for classes and asking around and doing research and then learning how to study better, I ended up with a better grade because of it. And I'm definitely all the better for it. I really want to thank you guys for going through this entire journey with me. I hope it wasn't too brutal or anything like that. I hope you guys learned a little bit from my experiences. I think that one of the things that I really wanted you guys to take from this video is that it is possible to eventually be competitive. And it doesn't matter at what pace you go. It doesn't matter where you start in your college career, like where you start getting good grades. Eventually you will get there. Maybe you have to do a post-bac. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to get to that point, that GPA that you want, as long as you put in the effort to do it. So I hope you guys learned something from this. I really appreciate you listening to my rant, my TED Talk, but make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.